Well, for decades, Aussies have been captivated by princesses, their style, their grace, and sometimes even their naughty habits. So what is it about these royal women that we love so much? Joining us now is Australian magazine royalty, Deb Thomas, from the Australian Women's Weekly.
Oh, to be a princess.
Yeah, let's start with Princess Diana, because she was really a bit of both, the wild and the love, wasn't she?
Well, we first fell in love with Princess Diana as Shy Di when she first became engaged to then the most eligible man in the world, really. And, of course, the royal family weren't quite prepared for what she was going to become in the way that she just completely changed all the rules, shook it all up in terms of, you know, being the first to fly to Australia, as we know, with William and bring her baby, get permission for that. She wasn't going to leave him behind. The way she raised those boys on roller coasters and that sort of thing. She was a real mum. And then, of course, when she would do her charity work, and she would be the first to cuddle babies that had HIV and so on. So she really rattled them. And, of course, the interview that changed everything was when she talked about there were 3 in this marriage. And that was really, I think, when the royal family had a problem. She was divorced from Charles in '96, lost her HRH status, and you know, but the people loved her. Everybody loved her. They loved her openness, her honesty, and just the fact that she was not stuffy, as was traditional protocols around the royal family at that time.
Now, I wouldn't say our Princess Mary was wild, but she's definitely not stuffy either, is she?
No, she's not. I think what we love about Princess Mary is that could be us. That could have been you at that pub. You know, that could have not been me. But it was the commoner thing. An Australian girl meets a crown prince at the Olympics and she goes up and she's done the most wonderful job. She has done everything right. She's so beautiful. She's so relaxed. She's so... you know, she's given the 4 children to the crown. There's an heir, there's a spare, and a couple of twins to go with it. And she's really tamed a very wild boy. So I think that there's really nothing that Princess Mary could not have done.
There's a lot of tedium in being a princess or a royal at all, isn't there? Meeting people, listening to speeches, being on your best behaviour. I would be Prince Philip within about half an hour and come out with outrageous statements. You have to be very controlled, I would think.
Look, there's a lot of rules and protocols, and even I think we know with Princess Mary, the princess training that she had to go through, not just in terms of making sure that she spoke French, Danish and English, but just in terms of her behaviour. And I mean, I love to think what they do when they let their hair down behind the scenes back in the palace, but certainly when they're out in public, there are absolute protocols they have to stick to, but some of them don't. Princess Margaret, I think, was the one that I always loved. She was a really naughty princess, the Queen's younger sister, and she was almost allowed to get away with anything. She chain smoked. She was partying with all of her sort of social, wealthy mates after the war when everybody else was trying to sort of rebuild the country. There was Margaret out with a couple of, you know, drinks and a cigarette in her hand, and people loved her for that. She was beautifully dressed. But the sad thing was, for her, she wasn't allowed to marry the person she was in love with, a bit like Charles, really, because Charles had been in love with Camilla when he married, or was in love with Camilla when he married Diana. And, of course, Princess Margaret's sister, as head of the Church of England, would not give permission for her sister to marry Peter Townsend, Captain Peter Townsend, because he had been divorced, so she had to marry someone else years later.
Yes, I think that she perhaps made the wrong call there. She could have abdicated, if that's the word, from being a royal princess and married, and perhaps her life would have been happy.
Well, there's rumours that she had affairs with Peter Sellers and Mick Jagger, so she certainly was the party princess at that time, a bit like Harry. She's sort of like the Harry to Will's, Margaret was to Queen Elizabeth.
And Princess Grace, she was the most beautiful of princesses, and what a story, a Hollywood star turns royalty.
Well, she was supposed to be quite a naughty girl from what I understood, but incredibly beautiful. And Prince Rainier came to America, met her. She was Alfred Hitchcock's favourite, of course. She'd won an Oscar. And he thought that she was the girl to marry, to bring her back to Monaco and really make Monaco a very glamorous place where movie stars would come to, which, of course, that's exactly what she did. But what I find extraordinary was that she was from a very wealthy Irish family, that he asked for a dowry. So I think that Rainier at that time was probably a bit short-strapped for cash and needed the glamour and the money. But, of course, they had a very successful marriage. But what was interesting was none of her movies were ever allowed to be shown in Monaco. So they didn't want her to go on being the movie star. She had to become her serene royal highness.
That's outrageous, isn't it? They want her for her glamour, and then she can't show her movies. What about Fergie? She just didn't quite cut it as a princess for
Well,
me.
again, we loved Fergie. We just thought she's a breath of fresh air. Diana's stirring up the royal family. She's changing things. Along comes her friend Fergie, who just takes it that little bit further. But of course, Fergie was scandalous in the end. You know, Andrew was away all the time. She was then seen with other men. The toe-sucking incident in the bikini with John Bryant. Fergie just did so many things wrong, but in a way we love her for that too. You know, she's sort of the naughty girl. You think back now, it's interesting how they've remained friends. She and Andrew have remained friends. She
And
was
they're
a
nice
tomboy.
girls too, the daughters.
Nice girls,
yeah.
and she has a great relationship with them, but she's certainly got and apparently the Queen loves her, but she just keeps embarrassing them with that scandal over the payment to meet Prince Andrew. You just think, what was she thinking?
So many cringes. And finally, the princess who tried to escape it all.
Oh, the runaway princess Charlene. I mean, that's an interesting story, isn't it? Again, another commoner, famous swimmer. She was actually here at the Olympics in 2000 with the South African team. But she met Albert at a swimming meet in 2000, and then, of course, they married. But what's interesting was that she was apparently, it was rumoured, that she was picked up at the airport in France trying to escape the marriage, and they confiscated her passport and sent her back. And, of course, she was fleeing because it was rumoured that he had fathered an illegitimate child during their relationship, and she wasn't too happy with that. So we don't hear a lot about her. They probably have a lot about her in South Africa, but I kind of worry that she might be sort of,
key.
as they say, the gilded cage. And,
in a dungeon somewhere. Thanks very much for that, Deb.
Great, Leila.
Always fun to talk Princess